Hey there, this is Pat Ennis of Ennis Legacy Partners. Welcome to the Exit Readiness Podcast. I'm here with my co-host Walter Dials, CPA and tax partner at GRF CPAs and Advisors in Bethesda, Maryland. And our mission here on the podcast is to provide you, the business owner, with subject matter expertise on topics that pertain to building what we would call transferable or sellable business value, and then for planning your eventual exit from the business. We want to help you build a business that's transferable and then help you exit successfully on your own terms and conditions. Walter, you got more initials behind your name than most people have in their name, and one of those is Certified Valuation Specialist. Is there anything more important in your mind as a valuation specialist in valuing a business than past and future revenue growth? Anything more important?
No, I think, as that pertains really to the company's ability to generate cash flow, that makes it certainly a primary factor. And a buyer is looking for, like any investor, they're looking for an asset that's going to appreciate in value and provide increasing returns. And for a company, that means they're going to have future revenue growth to generate those things.
Yeah. So again, and just helping listeners build that business, it's going to be transferable, it's going to be sellable, then growing revenue, sustaining it and growing it, of course, is essential. And so that's our topic today, the importance of sales and revenue growth for a successful exit. And our guest is Chris Tully, who's an expert in this area. And Chris is the president of Sales Growth Advisors. And he's founder and president, a sales consultant, and Sales Growth Advisors is a sales consulting firm focused on growing its customers' top line revenue, utilizing strategies proven across 30 years of corporate sales leadership roles. So Chris is an old guy like us. He's been around. He knows what he's doing. Sales Growth Advisors provides its clients with comprehensive sales strategy, integrated sales process, effective sales execution. And Chris acts as a fractional VP of sales. He helps businesses achieve breakthrough sales and growth, discipline, and accountability. Prior to Sales Growth Advisors, Chris spent 25 years leading sales and customer service customer service organizations ranging in size from 10 people to over 400, with revenues of 5 million to 1 billion. So he's got a lot of great experience across the board. He lives in Northern Virginia with his wife, Susan. He was raised here in the DC area, Bachelor of Arts from Georgetown University, 2 adult children doing well. He's a member of Grace Community Church in Sterling, Virginia. Chris, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks, Pat and Walter. Appreciate the chance to be with you today. Good morning.
Chris, thanks for joining us. Let's just start. Pat and I are always driving home the concept of a sellable business, meaning it's a business that has transferable value.
Yeah.
A lot of the clients we work with, closely held businesses, the owners make a lot of money, but oftentimes it's because they're wearing all the hats at their business. So when it comes specifically to sales and revenue growth, what do you think is most important from building a company that has sellable value, transferable value in that regard?
Yeah, so I think the goal is for the business owner to work toward getting themselves out of the sales role. I work with a lot of clients that, the principal in the company founded the company. Early revenue was often on his or her back based on relationships or deep subject matter expertise or other things that they knew that were, relevant in the market that they serve. And so the business grew, and yet they never really architected a model where they could step away. So they're an integral part of driving sales. And I believe that if you're going to position your business to be acquired by someone else, or for if not that, then for you to step into an ownership role and let the business run without you, you have to be able to prove that your revenue generation engine can function without you in the driver's seat. So, there's a lot behind that. A lot of times, startups and even existing companies don't build the right sales processes or put the right teams in place to enable the owner to get out of the way.
Yeah, those are really good points. And, Pat's partner, Corby, he often talks about when he's looking at a business, he talks about people and processes.
Yeah.
And I think that really sums up what you need for a successful revenue growth, right?
Yeah. My company, Sales Growth Advisors, is part of a larger network called Sales Acceleration. So it's the largest network of outsourced sales leaders in the country. And one of the things that we do with for our clients is we have this survey that we call a sales agility assessment. So we've done 2,400 of these things over time. And the survey results are really interesting. 73% of small to mid-sized businesses rate themselves poorly when it comes to managing their sales team and managing the processes that are required to have predictable and sustainable revenue growth. That's a really big number, right? So we see that and try to figure out how to fix it. But sales is not magic. It is a process, and it needs to be in place, defined properly, and managed well in order to be able to generate a predictable and sustainable growth path for the company.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question, because, being in the DC area now, Pat and Corby have clients that are not service clients throughout the country. Most of my clients are based in this area and they're service businesses.
Right.
And service businesses historically don't really look at themselves as having, well, they don't have sales teams usually. When I'm thinking of, consulting firms, CPA firms, law firms, what's your view on that?
Yeah, so I've been at this as an independent consultant now for, I think this is the 8th year. And my clients are a pretty even mix of product companies on the one hand and services businesses on the other. And although, and this is interesting as well with respect to government contractors, their model and their revenue generation rhythms are a little bit different than a commercial business. But there are some fundamental things that really need to be in place, kind of regardless of whether it's product or services, government or commercial. You need to have a business development or sales process in place that is easy to understand, is easy for someone to follow, is repeatable in the sense that if you dropped a new person into that model, he or she could generate good results by following the roadmap that you had laid out in place. So that seems like a really simple concept, but most of the clients that I engage with, at the beginning of the engagement really don't have something like that in place. So to follow that thread down the services angle for a moment, you still need to know where your target clients are. You need to have identified your value proposition in a way that it resonates with the clients. You need people that are capable of delivering that value proposition in a way that shows the client where the value really is. And then as you begin to build a relationship that will result in you delivering services to that client, you need a way to track that at the management team level. So you need an effective CRM system. You need a management reporting system. You need a sales management process to do all that stuff. And my take on it is often businesses try to take shortcuts on some of those things. And as a result, their revenue generation capacity isn't what it necessarily should be in order to position them well for someone else to step in and take over that stream of revenue.
Yeah, so Chris, it seems like you've mentioned two big macro kind of issues, right? The owner still being central to sales growth, and then in addition to that, a lack of a system or process for sales that can be measured and managed over time. And we see both those things.
Yeah.
A lot of the businesses that we work with are are founder led, and you know, they had a great product and a great idea to begin with, and they were great salespeople, and
Absolutely.
they got it to this point.
Yeah.
And but their sales have started to plateau, and for various reasons. And so we see it where they're still central to revenue and revenue growth, but also there really isn't a system in place that's or a process that's being managed, because really they're the ones that are driving the sales effort. And so uh, so then in regard to when you consider what owners most struggle with, then is it one of those two macro kind of issues, or something, or both of them uh, uh, the most? Is it one of those two, or is it something else?
Well, I think it's actually both of those issues, right? So, you want to have a sales team that's built properly and managed properly. And oftentimes that means the owner letting go of the day-to-day management of the sales team, right? And that's very difficult for these folks to do. They built the business usually from the ground up. They were the ones that built the initial customer relationships. They're the ones that are responsible in many ways for the customer experience, because their vision gets communicated through other pieces of the organization. And so it's really hard for them to step out of that role, but it's one of the best things they can do, because it elevates their responsibilities to um, a sort of a more executive and supervisory level than being the one that's actually in the business every day trying to make sales happen. There are lots of other issues that are probably more strategic and longer term in their focus that probably demand attention, right? So that's one piece. And the other piece, the process really does matter. I mean, I've seen way too many examples of businesses that are running their sales pipeline on Excel spreadsheets and email communications and drive-by conversations in the hallway, that sort of thing. And that's really it's doing a disservice to the client at the end of the day, because you're really not positioned properly to engage your client base at the right level, to be able to position your value proposition in a way that really is meaningful, and to enable your salespeople to get involved and help solve problems. Right. So I really think it's those two things. I don't know if you asked me to weight them one or the other. To me, it seems like a reasonably even split. Um,
Mhm.
the business of getting out of the day to day is pretty significant.
Mhm.
Hey, Chris, let me ask you a question. Not, it's probably not your area of expertise, but I'm sure you would have an opinion.
Yeah.
What role does incentive comp play when you're dealing with a sales team?
I think it's a great question. There are lots of different ways to pay people, and if you were to step back from it, you want a sales incentive system that aligns with the business's goals clearly, right? You want one that's affordable within the business P&L. So whatever you've established as a threshold for, we're going to pay out this much percent of revenue or this much profit, share of profit to the sales organization. You've got to have your finance team sort of bought into what that is. You also need a plan that will help you attract the right people into the business, right? So if you're going to go off and begin to recruit for additional salespeople or sales management, you need to have the incentive structure built out in advance of that recruiting effort, because it's usually one of the first questions that recruiters want to be able to answer on behalf of a potential prospect. So it should attract the right caliber and level of person. It should motivate that person, so there should be significant opportunities for overachievement as they exceed whatever their goals are, right? And it should work to retain that individual. So you want a plan that motivates the sales rep and or the sales manager to be sort of invested in the business for the long term. And there are lots of ways to do that. So from my perspective, the most effective plans are a mix of a base salary of some level, a commission structure or a bonus structure. Oftentimes in the government businesses, transactional sales commission doesn't really work the same way as it would in a commercial business, but you might build a bonus structure based on achieving certain objectives with the opportunity to exceed that. And then, where appropriate, and this differs certainly from company to company, but it's terrific if the sales organization or the leadership team can feel like owners in some way. Perhaps there's a profit share that's some piece of the profit is shared out with the team if they exceed their goals, right? So it's a combination of all of those things built together in a plan, right? That is designed properly to attract, retain, and motivate people, is affordable, and is aligned with the business goals. Beyond that, you want to make sure that you haven't created something that's so complicated you can't administer it, right? That's I've seen those, and so it needs to be simple to understand, and you have to be able to administer it.
Yes, Chris, follow-up question. Does you and sales growth advisors help with that piece?
Yeah, absolutely. We do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Yeah.
good. It's good to know. Did you have a follow-up, Walter?
No, I was just agreeing with Chris. I thought that was a really, really good answer. Very thorough.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So Chris, you may have answered this question, but I think it's I'm going to ask it again, just
Sure.
you have, because we have one of the things that we see that's very common that is correlated to these issues that we've been talking about already is forecasting sales and revenue. And we see that, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, because of the two big issues we've been talking about. What are your thoughts about that? Why, from your perspective, why do business owners have such a hard time forecasting sales and revenue?
Well, I think, in terms of how important it is, I found recently a survey that was done back in 2014 by a law firm that apparently did a lot of merger and acquisition work, and they went out and surveyed 120 private equity professionals. And what they were asking was questions around due diligence, right? Which is part of the process that you want to go through if you're positioning to sell your business, or if you're on the other end, if you're getting ready to acquire a business, right? And something that was fascinating to me was that roughly 30% of the time, during the due diligence process, roughly 30% of the time, sales projections didn't match actual results. And there's all kinds of things that are underneath that. Forecasting revenue is tough. It's a mix of sort of science and art, right? But it starts with having a healthy pipeline, whether it's a business development pipeline or it's a sales pipeline, right? So you should be able, for your business, to have a pipeline of expected revenue that follows a path from, and to make it very simple, I identified a prospect, I made contact with them, we discussed their needs, we provided solution, we may have had some negotiation around services we were going to provide, and eventually we either win the business or we don't win the business. But underneath that, every stage in the sales cycle, first of all, it should be reflected in a CRM system and be easy to see. Second, it should have, I call them hurdle questions, right? So if you're in the qualification phase of a sales cycle with a prospective client, there should be a set of questions that you absolutely need to be able to answer in order to move to the next phase. And one of the things that happens is sales teams sometimes take shortcuts. They make assumptions about what's going on in the sales cycle. They may not fully qualify the opportunity. They may believe something that is going to happen that maybe isn't realistic to expect that it's going to happen. right? And so what happens over time is the pipeline itself becomes full of opportunities that actually aren't going to close. And the problem with that is that the leadership team is depending on that information to make their forecast to whoever their ownership group is. It could be the owner of the company, it could be their, family investors, it might be that there's some private equity content, who knows? But if the pipeline itself isn't both, robust, big enough, and also very high quality, you start to believe that something is going to happen that actually isn't. So that boils down to pipeline discipline in a lot of instances is poor. Sometimes inspection habits are kind of sloppy, right? We assume that things are going to happen. We kind of don't dig into it. And if you haven't built a dashboard for your CRM system that makes those issues evident, you might not see them until it's, you're sort of past the turn, right? So I just think that, most of the time, well, not most, much of the time, sales teams don't do a great job qualifying opportunities. And so reps are chasing things that actually aren't going to close. So there's a lot underneath all of that. But the issue of getting your pipeline into a healthy condition is probably the most important thing that you can do in order to be able to accurately forecast when things are going to happen. Did I answer your question?
Yep, you did.
Perfect. Good. What do you see when, I'm sure you talk.
We see all this.
Yeah.
We see all of it. Actually, Corby, who you know,
Yeah.
it can preach a message on sales pipeline.
Yeah, we've talked about that.
He's actually, I'm sure you have.
Yeah, we have.
And he's actually built, him, spreadsheet jock guru. It's a religion. He's built pipeline spreadsheets for clients.
Yeah.
But they don't get used often, and I think it has much to do with the big issue of the lack of process and system that you were talking about.
So sometimes it's just interesting to me, the personality and background of whoever it is that's overseeing sales is actually really important. In a lot of businesses, somebody in the company who is not a trained sales leader ends up responsible for the sales team. Could be, I don't know, there could be 2 or 3 partners in a business. Maybe one of them's nominally the chief operating officer, and because they don't have any other place for sales to report, the CEO doesn't want it. It goes to that person. Well, that his or her skill set may be more operationally oriented. They may just simply not have the background or in some cases even the desire to lead a sales team. They sort of do it because they were asked to. My contention on all this is you need to find somebody to run your sales team that actually knows how to run a sales team. It's critically important because, and I think Walter started with this at the very beginning. This whole business of getting ready to become viable is all about revenue growth, right? Because without that revenue growth, there's all kinds of things that you're not going to be able to do. So you're better off with a trained sales leader than not.
So Chris, let me follow up on that. So what I find interesting, and you see this in a lot of businesses.
Yeah.
Eventually, the most successful sales guy, people just assume, oh, he should be the sales manager.
Right.
But, isn't that kind of like saying, hey, this guy's a Hall of Fame baseball player. He's probably going to be a great manager. I mean, it doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah, I think it happens, sort of way too often. The skill set. So there are overlaps in the skill set, right? So if you're a highly successful individual contributor, there are things that you know how to do that you probably should be able to teach other people. But you may not have either the inclination to want to teach other people, or the skill to be able to teach other people. So one of the things we do is we do a mentoring program for every now and then taking the very best salesperson and making that individual the sales leader. Every now and then that's the right decision, right? But we don't just want to take that person and sort of throw them into the mix and say, okay, you're now in charge of sales. So we do a mentoring program that, 16-week long mentoring program that's just designed to come alongside that person and walk them sort of very methodically through, hey, here's all the things you need to know before you take over this team. It's the motivations are really different in some cases. Highly successful individual contributors in many cases are, they're that way for a reason. They do a lot of things themselves. They take on, they own they own the opportunity, they own the relationship with the client. And sometimes it's difficult for those folks to be able to give that up. So you take someone that's your top dog sales rep and drop them into a sales manager position, and they just continue as if they were the top dog sales rep. Well, that doesn't really help the team underneath that individual. So we believe really strongly that a solid grounding in management practices, management discipline, how to provide feedback and coaching, how to manage a pipeline, to some degree, how to manage upward, because you have to make sure that your leadership team understands what's going on in sales without them having to do it themselves. There's a lot to being a sales leader. And I would never say that you can't take someone that is that person and drop them in and have them be successful. But I think you owe it to the business to make sure that they've got the right grounding and training to help them get there and be successful.
Yeah, for sure. So continuing on that theme of, properly resourcing the sales team, are there indications, other than sales suck or sales are great, that indicate that your sales team is properly resourced that, an owner can look for?
Well, I mean, you see a number of things that, you might have I'll give you, 4 or 5 of them, right? So you may find that most of your business is coming from existing accounts, and your ability to get new logos or new customers in the door is just suffering, right? And it could be that you could achieve your revenue objectives at a macro level if you just did a little bit better job with your existing clients. But if you do that, you're missing the opportunity to bring new clients in and begin to nurture those relationships. So you might see something like the mix of existing versus new business is way too high on the existing business side. A good example in the federal space is you may have, all of your eggs in 1 or 2 program baskets. And you may be only with one agency or service branch and wondering, hey, how do I diversify myself out to some other parts of the government that maybe I could serve? So there's that. You may see sales turnover at sort of unacceptably high levels. It's normal enough for there to be 10 or 15% turnover in a sales team over a period of time. Some degree you want to see a little turnover because you don't want people to be so comfortable that they just kind of hang around and collect their paycheck. Not that that's the case most of the time, but a reasonable amount of turnover is healthy. If you're losing 2/3 of your people every year, there's probably something going on, right? If you're losing customers for reasons that you don't fully understand, that may be an issue. And if you're simply seeing opportunities that you think are going to close, just not close. In other words, I have this pipeline, I can't seem to close it. So those are 4 or 5 things that, an owner should probably look at. Is this happening in my business? And if it is, I probably should take a look at it.
Yeah, it's really helpful.
All right, so Chris, this is fantastic. We're bumping up on 30 minutes.
Oh,
here.
yeah.
We made a commitment to you. So we'll begin to close, but is there any last closing thoughts or pieces of advice that you'd give? Maybe something that we haven't asked that we should have asked that you might impart here at the close?
Well, I'll tell you, maybe we've touched on a couple of these, but I'll just give you maybe two things. Um, so I have a friend, Fred Diamond, who runs an organization called the Institute for Excellence in Sales. And Fred also does a podcast called the Sales Game Changer podcast. And basically what he's been doing for the last 2 or 3 years is interviewing sales leaders. And in the 200 plus sales leaders that he's spoken to in that period of time, the biggest issues that they have are all around people. It's hiring, retaining, and motivating salespeople. And so my first take is make sure that you have the right people in your sales organization. Use a third-party assessment to help you, validate that, and also make sure that you have the right leadership for the team. And there's a lot behind that, but if your team is not led properly, they may not perform properly, and if they don't perform properly, that's going to be kind of tough for the business. The other thing is specific to a viable business. I'd encourage folks to begin a process. And you talk about beginning the exit plan well in advance of your timeline, right? I'd encourage your clients to begin a process of sales due diligence to make sure that every aspect of their sales organization is performing at the level that it should, because that will help them as they position themselves and their business for someone else to step in.
Thanks, Chris. This has
That's
been
good advice. What's the old adage? If sales are strong, I'm paraphrasing, getting this wrong, I'm sure, but if sales are strong, it sure does solve a whole lot of other problems.
Little revenue solves a lot of problems.
Right.
yeah, exactly.
I absolutely agree.
Hey,
Thanks,
Chris,
guys.
thanks so much for joining us. Before we close up, 2 questions. How can our listeners contact you? And is there anything you'd like to promote today?
Well, I think in terms of contacting me, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's a pretty straightforward way to get a hold of me, or you can go to my website, which is salesgrowthadvisor.com, and contact information there. In terms of anything to promote, especially, no, I would just say that if there are folks listening to this that think they have any issues like this and would like to talk about them, I'd be delighted to, have a short conversation to try and help understand, what the issues are. And if I can help, I'll be happy to help.
Fantastic. Hopefully some listeners will take advantage of that. This has been really, really great. So again, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And listeners, if you want help in maximizing the value of your business or planning for your eventual exit, you can reach Pat at 301-859-0860. And you can reach me at 301-951-9090. You can always access resources at exitreadiness.com, grfcpa.com, and ennislp.com. As always, thanks for listening. And until next week or next time on the Exit Readiness Podcast, this is Walter Dial and Pat Ennis signing off.